Here, hold this for me, you little bitch. Suck my balls, my hairy fucking big balls. Goddamn cock breath, Tommy, motherfuckers!
This is a video about a real-life Navy SEAL and his video game. Richard Demo Dick Marcinko, born 1940, is a military legend. He toured twice through Vietnam, worked for Navy intelligence in Cambodia, and was involved in the operations to rescue the American embassy during the 1979 Iran hostage crisis. This experience and its disastrous outcome inspired him to form SEAL Team 6, the United States' first permanent counterterrorism team. After an incident, he was arrested on charges of conspiracy and fraud against the government. From the walls of his room in a federal correctional facility, he penned his autobiography, Rogue Warrior, in 1992. The book was a hit on release, not only as an account of an extraordinary life in the service, but as a record of the US military's evolution, both culturally and strategically, from the late Cold War to the War on Terror. Ever one to capitalize on success, Marcinko and his co-author, John Weisman, got to writing sequels. What do you mean sequels, you ask? Didn't he already write about his whole life? What else is there? Marcinko went on to write what I can only describe as real person fan fiction about himself. I don't mean, here's my main guy and he's a super badass who's just like me, and his name is, Rick Mungo. No, these books star Richard Marcinko, real-life man, going on fictional adventures to save America. The closest analog I can think of is Tom Clancy. While he never actually served in the military, he was a big nerd for the topic. His books like Rainbow Six took actual fact and spun it off into fiction. It's not that far off from Marcinko's works, but the fact that he's literally just the guy in the story pushes it into a weird meta thing for me. A blurring of the line between the man Richard Marcinko and the character of Demo Dick. In 1996, Tom Clancy founded Red Storm Entertainment, a studio meant to extend his brand of military fiction into the world of video games. At the same time, a little company called Bethesda was growing their library of developed and published games. And as the sands of culture ever shift, someone at Bethesda said, "Hey, what if we had like a Tom Clancy type thing? Those are big." A series of military fiction based on real-life history with an established name and audience. In 2006, Rogue Warrior was announced, subtitled Black Razor, which they should have kept. It's not based on the autobiography, instead being like his fiction, and similarly, the game has nothing to truly compare it to. In an earlier video, I talked about the curious case of one story adapted 3 ways, but this is a little unprecedented. It's not adapting a story, it's adapting a person. Alright, options are a little sparse. No FOV, no VSync. I'm sure it'll be fine. Maybe regular difficulty? I see. Elite? Okay, well, I'm not that special. Maybe easy mode. If you're a pussy, select this one. Guess I'm regular then. Rogue Warrior takes place in 1986, starting out in North Korea. I'll let Dick himself explain the situation. Oh, sorry, he doesn't actually voice his own character. It's Mickey Rourke? Take it away, Mick.
The brass running this op is a dumb desk jockey named Admiral Travis Payton.
What?
I trained these men up for the SEAL program. They've saved my ugly ass more than once. They're dirtbags and hard motherfuckers. But I'm staring death in the face. It's them I want watching my 6.
Oh, cool. So this is going to be like a squad-based thing. We've got this cinematic of your teammates taking out the Korean guards.
I don't know why, but I know.
Commander, this is Peyton. What's your status?
It's a total goat fuck.
Okay, well, this is a single-player operation now. The first thing I noticed about this game is that it stutters so badly and so constantly that I thought it was screen tearing. The second thing I noticed was... Ooh. We good? Anyway. Really? Okay, maybe the PC Gaming Wiki will have some info on what's going on. Let's see, known issues. Resolutions higher than 1024 by 768 are locked to 60 Hz. VSync is not an option. It's on by default and doesn't work.
Cool.
This appears to be a problem on Windows 10 systems with AMD graphics cards specifically. Well, what do you know? I'll apologize in advance. This game makes my video drivers freeze constantly. I'm going to try to edit around some of it, but this thing is so poorly optimized that at many points there were less than 5 seconds between freezes. To help you discern when the video itself is and isn't lagging, I have introduced the Lag Buddy, who will be constantly spinning whenever there's a freeze in the game. Rogue Warrior is a first-person shooter where Mouse 2 throws a grenade and iron sights are on space. Marcinko glides across levels like a beautiful bald eagle, stealth-killing Koreans and cursing their names.
Lights out, motherfucker.
There's a real focus on stealth in this first level. Outgunned and with an unexpected dearth in allies, you get the sense that you're vulnerable. Your weapons are a last resort. The first 5 minutes has you shooting out a fuse box and donning night vision goggles to take out the guards. I think the way the light streams through the windows in this hallway looks really cool in the green infrared glow. Halfway through the level, your cover is blown, and while there's more direct action, the designers try to maintain the feeling of being outnumbered by teaching you about the god-awful useless cover shooting mechanic. This feature is so bad at hitting enemies that I'm pretty sure it exists purely to show off their model of Dick Marcinko. There's never a great time for a game to freeze, but Rogue Warrior likes to do it at especially inopportune moments. Don't worry, if you get hit in the stopped time, you can just hang out behind a corner and wait for your health to replenish, like a real Navy SEAL. It's around this point in the level that you'll start to realize Rogue Warrior is a bad shooter. The entire game is a linear series of hallways. For a designer, the advantage of this is that you get a lot of control over when and how the player will encounter obstacles, meaning you can handcraft interesting combat situations for them to work through. Rogue Warrior is mainly corridors and a few open shooting galleries with enemies who all have the same AI, and it's not a very impressive AI at that. This is made even lamer by Marcinko's psychic ability, or perhaps his excellent sense of smell with that Slovakian nose that gives him a radar of every enemy in their exact position. More often than not, the gameplay boils down to walk up to the guy and shoot him, like a boring 80s action movie starring an invincible protagonist. That's not to say you won't die, but dying is more like a speed bump that reminds you you're going to have to play Rogue Warrior for longer. The best part is easily Mickey Rourke's one-liners.
Yeah, fuckers suck ass.
I call them one-liners, but a lot of them are just him expressing an uncomfortable level of anger.
Fucking retard, you dead piece of shit.
You see, Dick Marcinko is a hard motherfucker from a hard upbringing, as detailed in the book. He grew up in a coal mining town in Pennsylvania, and every man in his family worked in those mines. He had a beleaguered home life as a teenager. His family was forced into a cramped house. His parents fought so much that his dad started avoiding home altogether. With little guidance, he'd spend his days wandering around, getting into trouble. He describes using the local train tunnels as shortcuts, only to find his back pressed against the wall with a speeding locomotive inches from taking his nose, his big Croatian nose. Right after your squad mates are killed, he's told by a superior to wait for pickup, only for him to respond.
Fuck no.
There's a quick aside from the book about his time at Catholic school with a traditional approach to discipline. As his life unfolds, he's more than happy to share his distaste for authority, and I wonder if this is where it all started. I can only wonder, because He refuses to go into detail. One of the most engrossing parts of Rogue Warrior, the book, is just how much is left up to interpretation due to Marcinko's total lack of introspection. Like, there's a part where he talks about having a sexual relationship with an adult woman when he was only 15, unbeknownst to her, I should add, and he just sort of glosses over it. No big deal. That was just the 50s, baby. I was a little befuddled by his description of entering the military. You'd think that Navy SEAL legend and founder of Team 6 would have some strong motivation for serving his country, but it just sorta happens. One day he shows up and applies to the Marines for no given reason. After being rejected, he applies to the Navy because he saw the 1951 film The Frogmen. Here, we get an actual explanation. Quote, "I could do that. I'm a reasonably aggressive sort of person." Marcinko's time training is described like a period of childhood innocence. He goes on about the exercises like their play, the weapons like their toys, and the lifestyle like a frat house. He loves going out, getting drunk, and fighting. Also having lots of sex, overage this time. It's pretty clear where his priorities lie. For reference, he devotes 661 words to skydiving training. 145 go to his marriage.
That's the factory. The great leader must have a tiny dick.
Level 2 is about infiltrating a Korean missile factory and pissing.
Tiny dick.
Oh, come on, that guy's just a worker. It might surprise you, but this is also lore accurate. The most action he saw was in Vietnam, and it includes the killing of a seemingly random boat driver so they can steal the boat and his clothes. He has nothing to say about killing a non-combatant. This is the point at which the stealth-focused opening breaks up into a full-fledged action movie. You are a one-man army, taking out swarms of Koreans. Perhaps Marcinko would call them angry small yellow people, as he had the Viet Cong. I find the glorious depiction of combat interesting, because Marcinko himself seems to hold it in two regards. On one hand, he describes it with an almost sexual thrill. Quote, "I couldn't stop smiling. We'd shot off every frigging bullet we'd carried with us, and we stunk of cordite and sweat. We smelled like the warriors we'd always wanted to be. War was great." On the other, there's a grim seriousness that's at odds with this attitude. Quote, "I regard my first Vietnam tour as a sort of spec war genesis, in which I was recreated out of the primal mud of the Delta and the purifying heat of our gunfire. In the beginning, I was a green ensign who'd spent his whole life talking about kicking ass and taking names, but had never done it. According to the Bible, on the seventh day, God rested. But for SEALs, the evening and the morning of the seventh day is the time to go out and annihilate the enemy. The God of SEALs, after all, is Yahweh, the Old Testament God, the tough, harsh, severe, vengeful, eye for an eye desert deity, the God who said, 'Go and smite Amalek and utterly destroy all that they have, and spare them not.'" Marcinko laces his memories with criticisms of the way that the military seems to value the lives of enemies above its own people, and the way he's expected to treat enemy soldiers and civilians. As a counterexample, he cites an incident of an Israeli lieutenant shooting a boat of Palestinian terrorists on sight because they might have had grenades on board. Just a gut instinct, you know? This is how he believes a soldier should operate. The end of the level's really weird, so you place a charge on one of the missiles.
I got a visual on the missiles.
Copy that. What do you see?
Looks like some have already shipped out.
Son of a bitch. Can you take care of the ones still in the factory?
There's a Pope shit in the woods.
Real stealthy like this. Then at the end, the explosion goes off, you get a cutscene, then you walk 5 inches out the door, then another cutscene of Marcinko in this truck. Very strange direction. Mission 3 is in like a warehouse or something. There's a number of weapons to pick up from fallen enemies, but the gun variety is lacking. Outside of the obvious distinctions between machine guns, snipers, and shotguns, every weapon feels the same, and every enemy fights the same with them. Every firefight is just shoot, take damage, cover, wait, shoot. It's very bland. This stretch of docks is cursed or something. I spent 10 minutes here because the freezing got so bad, and I'm getting shot at.
Suck my balls, my hairy fucking big balls. Wrap them around your fucking mouth.
Well, the grenade launcher is kind of fun. The one time in the game they give it to you.
Goddamn cock breath counting motherfuckers!
The absence of squad mates feels especially strange in this game. It reads to me as a concession by the designers at Rebellion, who were tossed this project like a hot potato after the previous developer, Zombie Studios, got a little too ambitious. The technical foibles can be chalked up to the fact that, going by announcements, this thing was probably thrown together in about a year, maybe less. Still, the solo adventure doesn't match up with Marcinko's own writing. He was not a one-man army and makes no attempt to paint himself as such. In fact, the greatest virtue he holds is what he calls unit cohesion. His relationships in the military are so important that they overshadow his home life. Upon returning from his first tour in Vietnam, he almost immediately signs up for a second. Quote, "I'd been gone almost a full year. Now I was about to go out again, and who knew when I'd be back. I was a stranger to my kids and to my wife, but the fact was, I wanted to go. I was used to getting what I wanted, and for better or worse, Kathy had signed on as a Navy wife. I'm sure it was tough on her, but she was no different from thousands of other Navy wives who lived within the 100 square miles or so that made up Virginia Beach and Norfolk. In truth, I felt closer to the men with whom I served than I did to my wife and kids. We'd been through more together than most husbands and wives go through in a lifetime." Rogue Warrior, the book, is a fascinating perspective on the Vietnam War, just for how uncritical it is. Even as it was happening, there was a massive anti-war movement in America, and in the years since, it's been universally agreed upon as a mistake, pointless carnage and trauma for a battle we didn't even win. You'll often read statements like, "They were sending boys off to die in countries they couldn't even point to on a map." And with retrospect, many of those boys questioned why they were even there in the first place.
I think there's a large percentage of people returning who say, no, we went there under an illusion, and now we'd like to say something about it.
Not Marcinko. In fact, given the chance, he leaps at an opportunity to return. There seems to be no such thing as an unjust war. War is just a part of humanity, and he wants to fight in it. He doesn't even give some patriotic explanation about serving his country and how the capitalist ideology must win. I think he just loves killing. He loves the stakes and the intensity, and by thrusting himself into a life or death scenario, he relieves himself of the burden of wondering why any of this is happening. Who cares? There's a gun in my face. Why'd you go back then? Who cares? There's a gun in my face. Time to blow them all to fucking hell.
You haven't lived till you've crossed North Korea on the lid of a goddamn train. Fucking wind is so cold it'd freeze the balls off a fucking polar bear.
Mission 4 advances into Russia to track down the source of the nuclear missiles. The game's about finding nukes or something. There's a mildly cool reveal shot here. Just the vista. I'm trying to be nice. The opening of the level is a good example of how shallow the mechanics are. Like, I'm gonna be quiet and take this guy out. Oh, cool. Stealth is something you do for a second before the game forces you to shoot your way out of things.
Get dead, fuckbag.
Marcinko becomes stiff as a board the moment he descends a rope. That's SEAL training. I get an achievement for killing with 50 headshots, somehow while the game is frozen. During his second tour in Vietnam, Marcinko and his men were called to help in response to the Tet Offensive. This was a massive military operation by the Viet Cong launched on the day of the Vietnamese Lunar New Year festival, for which it's been named. While it was considered a failure in the long term, the attacks were vicious and left a lasting psychological impact on those involved. Marcinko had trained his unit in guerrilla tactics, warfare best suited for the jungles, rivers, and tall grass. They were not prepared for the urban combat they found themselves in. He describes a young recruit named Clarence Risher rushing out into the street, his eyes ablaze with madness as he fires toward the enemy. The next second, a sniper's bullet had blown half of his head off. The scene, as he describes it, is horrifying. It's sickening. The long, painful process of bleeding out, watching his brain slowly turn off. There was an incredible rage in me right then. Some of it was directed at Risher himself. If he hadn't been dying, I probably would have killed him myself. He was dying because he'd been stupid. He walked down the middle of the street. You don't do that, and he knew it, and he did it anyway. And therefore, he was a stupid asshole cunt breath, and he deserved what he'd gotten. Except he didn't deserve it. And as he lay there, his head in my lap and his brains in my hand, I knew he didn't deserve it at all. There was an incredible rage in me right then, because I felt Risher shouldn't have been there in the first place. We were SEALs. We were jungle warriors, not dipshit urban policemen. The goddamn colonel and the special forces should have been out in the street taking the point instead of sitting behind 6 rolls of concertina razor wire and 10-foot-high concrete walls, and his fucking need is a fucking West Point parade ground compound. There was an incredible rage in me right then, because my man had been killed by some goddamn stinking 70-pound soaking wet VC Mr. Charlie Pussnut sniper. Right then I hated all Vietnamese, a useless class of nuck-mom swilling subhumans who needed 2 sticks to pick up 1 grain of rice, but used only 1 to carry 2 buckets of shit. And there was an incredible rage in me right then, because when Risher was sniped, my own immortality got nicked as well. First night out in Vietnam, the AK round came skipping across the river and popped the guy next to me right between the eyes. Why him and not me? I was running the trails on Dung Island barefoot one day, and the man behind me stepped right into my footprint, and blam! A small landmine went off. It blew the beta boot right off his foot. Why him and not me? Guys on either side of me had been hit. Why them and not me? Why? Because I was fucking immortal, that's why. That's what I'd felt. That's why I'd do anything, go anywhere against any odds, and tell my men that with me, they were always gonna be okay. Dings? Yeah. Scratches? Yeah. Even an occasional pop now and then, but nobody dies with Marcinko. Unit fucking integrity. Nobody dies. You will be alright with Lieutenant Rick Marcinko. Demo Dick, Shark Man of the Delta. Now hear this, nobody dies. I don't know who I hated more. The VC scumbag who'd shot Risher, or Colonel Shit and Polish, who was too much of a pussy to do his own fighting, or the goddamn Vietnamese who had been doing this crap to each other for generations. I caressed Risher's dying face with my hand. You stupid, dumb fuck. This is one of the most important things that ever happens to Richard Marcinko. It is the ultimate traumatic event that shapes the way he looks at himself and warfare. And his life is warfare. It's like something snaps in him, and just talking about it sends him into an animal rage. It distills his greatest foes, his enemies in combat, and military bureaucracy. The powers that be are incompetent and privileged, pansies who direct men to battles they'll never fight, not real men who go in and get it done. That's Marcinko and his team.
I mean it, Dick. No bullshit. You wrap this thing now, or I will nail your ass to the wall for insubordination.
Say it again, boss. You're breaking up.
When they drop in, they're on their own. They play by their own rules, and they'll do whatever they need to win, whatever it takes to protect his people. He justifies using torture on the Viet Cong and suspected Viet Cong. He would later write an op-ed for reportingwar.com, expressing his support for Guantanamo Bay, excusing what he calls manipulation of suspected terrorists, because better 1,000 innocent foreigners suffer and die than a single American. This is easy for him to do because he's developed a skill for demonizing his enemies along any line he needs to. Racial, religious, ethnic, ideological, national, it doesn't matter. The many epithets he drops throughout the book are rooted in a hate deeper than racism. It's a hatred for anyone who is not his people. As he learns the Vietnamese culture, he finds that the locals touch the Americans as they walk through the village. They do this not out of curiosity, but a superstition, that by touching them, they are passing their demons on to the round eyes. When an elder grabs his arm, Marcinko grabs right back. He adopts the Vietnamese phrase for fuck you, du man you, and anglicizes it into a catchphrase of his own. Doom on you, Charlie.
Doom on you. Threatening to court-martial my ass. Man, I don't give a rusty fuck what he thinks. I'm paid for results, not methods.
Mission 5 is noteworthy for being the best-looking level of the bunch. Most of this game is concrete military hallways and warehouses. This snowy midnight manor is a nice change of pace. I like the pale color palette. The infinite snowfall does not play well with the screen tearing, though. This also has the longest pretend to care about stealth section since the first mission. There's a number of memorable set pieces and locations here. The hedge maze crawling with guards, a gunfight from the bottom of the stairs, a library shootout. There's even a little trick at one point. Ooh. The reader learns that Marcinko has a child when he mentions that his second was on the way. That was right before he left for Vietnam again. Now he's coming home to a wife he's left to give birth and raise 2 children on her own. He's frustrated that, unlike the other Navy wives, she hasn't had enough time to do volunteer work for the government that would help advance his career. After sashaying into the world of dinner parties and wearing a suit, he gets a new assignment: naval intelligence in Cambodia. The chapter about going to Cambodia is a little dissociating to read. On one page, he is sitting with his wife, motioning to his children asleep in their tents on a family outing, saying he's gonna miss them. His wife, trying to appeal to some part of him that loves his family, says, "They'll miss you too. They've only just gotten to know you, and now you're going again." Hey, missing kids is part of what being a SEAL's all about. There are times, Dick, when your being a SEAL begins to grate on us all. It's what I am, Kathy. It's what I do. A few pages later, he goes into detail on all of the women he slept with in Cambodia. This includes a British nurse, a French secretary, and an endless line of the local women. He calls them LBFMs, little brown fucking machines. At one point, he grows frustrated that American politicians are visiting the country, showing no interest in the intelligence he's been collecting or the state of the Cambodian military. He just can't wrap his head around why they bothered to show up. He learns that these trips are excuses for sex tourism. He hears stories from embassy staffers about congressmen groping and raping them without any consequence. In response to this, Marcinko starts to write reports as short as possible, pass it to them in the hall, and, quote, give them lots of time to accomplish their mission. The question most asked by them was, where can a congressman get an absolutely perfect blowjob, or some incredible fucky? My diplomatic answer was always the same: wherever you'd like it best, Congressman. At my quarters, when I ordered dessert, number 1 houseboy Sothon would produce a LBFM, and I'd eat my dessert in bed. At the end of the mission, Marcinko discovers a Soviet anti-nuke defense system. I barely believe Dick Marcinko knows how to use a typewriter, much less a 1980s computer terminal, but he manages to reroute the nuke to the base itself. My video drivers freeze and the cutscene desyncs, naturally. This is a nuke? Mission 6 takes place in a bunker deep below the mansion, which the explosion above has sent into chaos. No matter what you end the previous level with, the game makes the odd choice to start the next one with a silenced pistol and a machine gun. You'll hardly notice because the guns all feel the same. It also limits you to 2 at a time, which you'd think would be to force you to switch often, but it doesn't really matter because the guns all feel the same. Anyway, the game is unplayable for 30 seconds because it freezes twice in a row. 1979 was a big year for Americans living in Iran. There was this little thing called a hostage crisis, where a bunch of militant students seized control of the US Embassy. This triggered over a year of tense negotiations and covert military operations. Those operations were planned by a special terrorist action team assembled specifically for the job. Marcinko was among those chosen for this special joint task force, bringing together the best and brightest from all branches of service. The TAT was a disaster. Their rescue attempt, Operation Eagle Claw, was first thwarted when a group of random Iranians passed by one of the helicopters as it was taking off. This situation had been suggested during planning. Quote, someone asked the obvious question. What happens if a couple of Iranians show up when you're running the test? Without thinking, I said, you kill the cocksuckers. The room went silent. How could you even think that? How could I not? I'm sorry, General, but if someone's out there, then he's violating the Iranian curfew. And so all I'd be doing is carrying out Allah's will. Later, when this actually happens, the same question is raised. Quote, what should we do with the Iranians from the bus? I answered for him. Kill the sons of bitches. My colleagues looked at me incredulously. Just kidding, I told them. I wasn't kidding. At all. After so many years of dehumanizing enemy soldiers, is it easy to extend that to civilians? Marcinko's lack of introspection only leaves us to guess. After 3 of the helicopters were compromised by mechanical failures, the other 3 were ordered to return to base as the mission was called off. On the way, one of these crashed into a transport aircraft, which promptly exploded, killing 8 people for absolutely nothing. Eagle Claw was, as Marcinko puts it, one humongous goat fuck. So bad that the Iranian Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini claimed its failure was an act of God to stop the Americans. Marcinko claims this was more affecting than Risher's death in Vietnam all those years prior, because it was caused by sheer incompetence from the higher-ups. The chain of command was too convoluted, with too many moving parts. Terrorists didn't act that way. They were off the book, flexible, and could improvise. If America was going to respond to threats like this in the future, we'd need a team that worked like no other, specially assembled for unconventional warfare. The result was Marcinko's final draft for what he called Navy SEAL Team 6. The Navy already had 2 SEAL teams, their own elite guard of covert ops, but the name 6 was chosen to fool other countries into thinking we had more. I'm not kidding. Kind of like offhandedly mentioning you're on your second child before your first. There was one little annoying problem, however. Marcinko had a family and stuff. At this point, his marriage was, by his own admission, on the rocks. The constant traveling, moving house, and distance had worn away at his relationship with his wife, and he'd practically missed half his kids' childhoods. His relationships with them are never detailed. They are only referred to by name once. Marcinko was at a crossroads. On one hand, he had an offer to attend a military college. This was essentially a 12-month vacation he could take his family on, doing easy studies and earning certifications that could mean big promotions. It's also an opportunity to spend time with his wife and get a whole year with his children before they took off for college. On the other hand, he really wanted to lead Team 6. The program was his baby, and he'd drafted it as a subset of the Navy out of branch pride, with a Navy SEAL commander at the helm. That position wasn't filled, and it tantalized him. Marcinko admits that going to Team 6 will unravel his marriage. So, naturally, he immediately goes and asks for the position. After meeting with a superior and getting what he wanted, he walks out, sees his friend, and flashes 2 big thumbs up.
Send me the bill, cocksuckers.
Mission 7 is about infiltrating a dam. It reminds me a lot of Metal Gear Solid. In fact, according to Jeremy Blaustein, I don't know, the localizer of MGS1, Marcinko's Rogue Warrior books were direct inspirations for the English script.
I always work alone.
Alone? Are you an otaku too?
Karl Marx. Fuck Karl Marx. He's a big fucking faggot pussy.
I get to this room where it's only really possible to kill one guy quietly until I realize that there's a shimmering fuse box in the corner. Do you remember that? From the first level? I went back and checked, there's like 3 in the entire game. SEAL Team 6 was, true to Marcinko's vision, a unit unlike any other. They dressed like civilians, grew out their hair, traveled light, and paid in cash. At one point, they commandeered a military plane, flew into a naval reserve station in New Orleans, landed with no advance warning, and refused to identify themselves on arrival. At last, Marcinko had found his people, or more specifically, handcrafted them. Many were personal picks or recommendations from close friends, and they spent their days bouncing between bases and doing constant, high-intensity training exercises. They drank and slept around and got into fights. There's a real sense that they gave him what his actual family never could, and he defended them from superior scrutiny. Despite this, they did little to no actual counter-terror work in the 4 years he led them. This is to Marcinko's great frustration, and he chalks it up to a disconnect between leadership and reality. Quote, Ronald Reagan saw terrorism through his own ideological prism, instead of viewing it through the warrior's clear glass. He viewed terror as a byproduct of the East-West struggle, another form of surrogate warfare waged by the Soviets against the West, not as the far more sinister struggles of anarchy against order, of culture against culture, of sociopaths against society, which would outlast the Cold War. He was mistaken. Finally, we have some clue as to Marcinko's actual beliefs. He sees himself as a force of social order, a cursed soul, to be the gun in normalcy's hand, but always a tool, never one with it. Eventually, the scrutiny became too much, and when some powerful allies transferred jobs, there was no one left above his pay grade to cover for his unorthodox style. According to Marcinko, he partied too hard for the stiffs in command to handle, and they were more than happy to let him go. No vote, no say. You plant some charges on the nukes and get the wonderful new objective, get the fuck off the dam! Mission 8 takes place in a submarine base, with the ultimate goal of destroying the nuclear navigation chip or whatever, so the Ruskies can't win the Cold War. Wow, what a red level. You know what Dick Marcinko did after the SEALs? Red Cell. Demo Dick had been fired from his dream job, and what's more, a minor citation on his record had been bumped up to a major one, and that ruled him out of war college. With no fallback plan, he was forced to improvise. He called it Red Cell, a new special Navy unit, above top secret. Its purpose was to test the security of the military's own bases. He got a bunch of old friends and fresh faces for what was almost a spiritual successor to Team 6, a rowdy group of guys who didn't play by the rules. Many descriptions of action and warfare bled together for me in this book, but his recounting of Red Cell's operations was actually pretty gripping to me. Team 6 was meant to respond to terror tactics, but Red Cell employed terror tactics against American bases. They eavesdropped on conversations in bars popular with servicemen, learned the names and goings-on of security, and made explosives out of household objects. They exploited vulnerabilities like guards using different radio frequencies, doing signal checks, and being short-staffed. They sent a crazed gunman to a nearby hospital to lure all the military police, then crippled the power grid. The problem is stovepipe organization, he explains. Security, medical, personnel, and air all report to different authorities, and they all eventually get to one person, but when they're disrupted on the ground level, they get confused. They have no way to coordinate, share information, or adapt. In an hour, the whole base is thrown into chaos. Ronald Sheridan was a security officer involved in one such exercise. He was told that it would take place on the base premises only, so it was a surprise when he was kidnapped in front of his house at 3 a.m. His wife was about to shoot the Red Cell member who was pointing a gun at him, but he assured her after seeing a badge that this was just a security exercise. Sheridan was taken to a nearby motel and made to wait for over 12 hours. Eventually, they received a call from Marcinko that the exercise was extended overnight, and that they'd be filming a video. A group of Red Cell members joined them in the room before Sheridan was stripped naked, handcuffed to a chair, and had a bag tied over his head. Some sort of argument broke out among them, and they started knocking Sheridan around in his chair before kicking and beating him on the floor. He was dragged into the bathroom, picked up by his ankles, and had his head dunked into the toilet. It was flushed 3 times to keep him from suffocating while the water rose back up. He was beaten some more, then laid over the side of the tub while a man sat on his back and his head was again dipped into the water repeatedly. When he felt a sharp pain in his chest, he began to scream that his rib was broken. In response, they beat and drowned him some more. In an interview with the LA Times, he said that it was all filmed and lasted about 15 minutes in total, though his recollection may be fuzzy as, in his own words, it was as if reality had ceased to exist. Sheridan was denied a doctor and kept in the room until the next morning. The futility of the exercise has been a point of criticism for many in and out of the military. If it had been real, his wife would have shot the kidnapper, and even if she didn't, the kidnapping itself would have been proof enough of a vulnerability. There was no need to strip a man naked, beat and drown him for 15 minutes straight. The only reason we know this much about this incident is that Sheridan was not technically enlisted in the military, and it didn't occur on government property. Thus, he sued the U.S. government for $6 million shortly after in a very public case. Marcinko does not mention this incident. According to him, the end of his time in Red Cell was caused by a buildup of internal distaste for him. As usual, he partied too hard, but this time he was embarrassing the higher-ups. Their dialogue in the book is almost childlike, babbling about rules before he cuts them off with something about how terrorists don't play by the rules, or something. You plant the charges on a couple of bombs throughout the level, and as everything comes crashing down, Demo Dick escapes by the skin of his teeth.
Party's over. What took you motherfuckers so long?
I heard the commies cost you 2 good men, Commander. I'm sorry.
Not as sorry as those motherfuckers.
Are you fucking kidding me?
I'm gonna bring it to them. I'm gonna show them what time it is.
You you are played out by a Sex Jam remix of Mickey Rourke's voice lines, including a breakdown entirely made of pain sounds.
What the fuck was I doing again? Yeah, fucking shit up. Fucking ninja style. I'm gonna bring it to him. I'm gonna show him what time it is.
Marcinko's own military career was instead played out by a federal indictment. A former SEAL, Charles Mason, set up a distributor called Ramco International as a subsidiary of an arms manufacturer called Accuracy Systems, owned by Charles Byers. Marcinko helped Byers get a government contract with an under-the-table agreement that he'd overcharge them and give the extra money to Marcinko as a kickback. They both got obliterated in court. Byers was convicted of conspiracy and conflict of interest, and Marcinko for defrauding the government. He spent 10 months in a federal correctional institute and was fined $10,000. It was in the walls of that very prison that he began his autobiography. In the book, he plays the case off in laughable fashion. He spends one page detailing what happened, claiming that Mason had a financial interest in the company and wasn't, like, the founder. He frames the trial as a kangaroo court that was rigged against him from the start and gets really upset that he couldn't brag about all his military service as evidence of his innocence, as if that had anything to do with the case. The book ends with him fantasizing about setting up a private military to essentially be a new SEAL team, but with even less accountability, which, knowing the SEAL's track record, sounds like a great idea. In reality, this is all a setup for his fictional continued adventures. For as much as he goes on and on about his men and the Bond and the enemy, he hadn't seen action since 1968. That's 24 years at the time Rogue Warrior was published in 1992. Marcinko's career essentially goes 2 tours in Vietnam, have sex with prostitutes in Cambodia for a year and a half, form Team 6, do nothing on it, get let go, form Red Cell, play pretend with no real danger to himself, discharged for fraud, write 16 books of fanfiction where he's an action hero. Curse of the Infidel? What is he, a pharaoh? I should mention, the front of Rogue Warrior has a quote about how he makes Arnold Schwarzenegger look like Little Lord Fauntleroy. This is from a New York Times review, but with half the context cut out because it's actually a negative statement. Incredible. In 2021, Richard Marcinko died of a heart attack in his home. He was presumably with his second wife, Nancy. He got divorced from Kathy in 1985. I forgot to mention that because he did too. Just wasn't important, I guess. After I finished my notes for this video and I wound all the way back to the beginning to start on the script, I had a sort of chilling realization. Dick Marcinko grew up in a cramped, tense household. By the time he was a teenager, his father was avoiding the family altogether, leaving him lots of time to get up to trouble. And then you get to some later passages of the book, when he returns to his own family after basically running from them for years. He describes their awkward dinners with few words exchanged, and it clicked for me. I realized he really became his father. He didn't know how to have a stable home life. He was let loose to do what he wanted. That was his childhood, having sex and getting drunk, almost getting misted by a train. I don't think he ever stopped living like that. The way of life just became more intense. I'm going to play armchair psychologist. You can forgive me later. But my read on Marcinko is that he had a real deficiency in empathy. I don't know if it was the home life or the trauma of war or everything together. A foundation of defensive self-interest met an acquired rage, and the result was cruelty. I think he loved being a kid, bankrolled by the government to do whatever he wanted, to buy all the toys and candy in the world. I think he loved hurting others, inflicting some sort of bottomless anger on people who weren't people to him. His fiction was a way for him to act out the unanswered dreams of a psychopath, a license to kill with impunity, because there's a thrill greater than sexual at the end of the knife. Which end? Both ends. And yet keep the facade of military romance, where there's great glory but great sacrifice. All sacrifices are made to keep society together, and so the deaths in combat aren't tragedies of a mindless war fought for corporate interests. They're elevated to a divine purpose. He blows a man's brains out and orgasms under the weight of his great burden. I have no problem saying I think he was a psychopath, because, frankly, if he were alive, I don't think he'd mind. He'd probably call me like a gay slur back. The only time Dick Marcinko reflected on himself was in a puddle of blood. The game is dog shit. I don't have to tell you that. It's probably one of the worst shooters I've ever played, certainly of those released after the year 2000. It's buggy, boring, and oh yeah, you didn't miss anything. It's 2 hours long. Like, I play games kinda slow for videos, and I couldn't even get to 2.5. While it can't capture the full scope of who Dick Marcinko is as a person, it succeeds in adapting who he thinks of himself as, which is a bigger part of someone than you may think. Simple, linear, self-aggrandizing, and all about shooting nameless foreigners. You might have seen a reference to an article in this video called The Crimes of SEAL Team 6. It's a great read, linked below, and there's one passage that really stuck out to me. Team 6 often engaged in ritual mutilations of their enemies' bodies, a war crime under the Geneva Convention, and one leader who investigated these incidents is quoted. Often we'd hear, well, they're savages. They don't play by the rules, so why should we? Shout out to YouTuber Illustrious Magic for his video on this game. Its central premise was an inspiration for this one, and thank you to my patrons who keep this channel free. $10 a month patrons get access to exclusive commentary tracks for these videos. You can also tip me on coffee and listen to my podcast. Bye.
Here comes a
Holes
daredevil.
like fireworks. Ooh! Fucking commies keep getting in my way. No surprise, motherfuckers.
Happy fucking birthday.
That's right, Nighty Night, you sweet piece of shit. Enjoy the ride, cocksucker. Have a nice trip. Boom time, baby. Trick or treat. Looks like a party. Come on. I got places to go and people to meet. Assholes are everywhere. Fuckers are out in force. Hi-ho, hi-ho. This fucker's gonna blow. Anytime, anywhere, any place.